Now that we have you here, let's pay. Well, let me get your take on impeachment before we go any further.
You know that Sondland guy, the other guy in the transcript. You know who that is?
He owns like some hotels.
Yeah, he's like a hotel millionaire from Oregon.
And he got appointed ambassador to the
EU. The EU,
of course.
And he's just like a millionaire donor. He's just a guy who bought an ambassadorship and gave millions to Trump's inaugural. So it was like, okay, that's just a prestige position. That's just so that you're a rich asshole and you get to be called the honorable for the rest of your life.
Right.
Why is he being trusted to do the crimes?
Well, I think it's because he's not a professional. Because I think that if he was a professional ambassador, like the EU, all presidents appoint people like this, right? But they usually do it to like Monaco.
Yeah.
Or you'll do some country that we may never have to call you in the 4 years. We may not, you just keep doing what you're doing and we may never even have to contact you. To get the EU is, I think, is probably a little bit more relevant a position. But I think it's because for the very reason that he's probably not qualified, is that like, oh, he's just a guy. He's just going to be he's a bag man.
He's a hotel guy.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, normally if you
they take hotel guys seriously in this administration.
If you have one of the important ones, like a ambassador to the Court of St. James, normally you have a career civil servant do that, someone who knows what the hell they're doing.
Right.
But Trump obviously doesn't trust the State Department. And he's probably right to. They all hate his guts, and they think he's a maniac because he is. So all of the important roles that you're supposed to give to smart people have just gone to donors. Like Woody Johnson is now the ambassador to the Court of St. James.
Right. Why would you trust this guy? I don't know. Who else are you going to trust?
That's the thing. Trump doesn't have. He doesn't have Haldeman. He doesn't have a Chuck Colson. He doesn't have any competent bagmen.
That's right.
At all. And I was thinking about this the other night because, like, my overall take so far is I'm really bored with this because it just sounds like it's the same. It's a reboot. It's the same damn story from 2017. It's every single thing from that time, like right down to the inscrutable Russian names that I don't understand.
I was saying Audrey instead of Andre for a long time.
Everything's the same, and it's just it's. I mean, I know there's something real to it. I'm not trying to downplay that, and I'm just living in the spectacle zone where I see the same kind of self-congratulating, back-patting, how dare you, sir, journalism happening, or Chuck Todd, giving an indignant monologue, something like that. And I think, I saw this before. I saw this 2 years ago. You could be taking clips, showing me clips from MSNBC from 2017 about the need to impeach the president, how it's gone too far, and, Republicans are going to wake up and come to our side. And I would not know the difference. So like on one level as an entertainment, as a new plot, it's like get better writers. The fact that it's a country that abuts Russia is okay. It just doesn't sound new enough. If we're like Burma or something, like Trump did a quid pro quo with the prime minister of Burma, that could be fun. That's like tigers and a jungle adventure, something like that. But now it's just back to Russia.
Right, the mise en scène is very similar.
$500 word. It's funny you should say that, Virgil, because I feel like it's much funnier than it was the last time around. Was I just not paying attention before? Was it funny before?
It was not funny before. It was boring.
The amazing thing about this is exactly, I mean, you're right. It is like, but it's like, hey, we did one that looked back on collusion. Let's do a sequel that is actually they're colluding in the future. And that's what this is. Yeah. I mean, but we didn't have what we have now because you've got people like Volcker who get wrapped up into this, who at one point go like, hey, wait a second. I'm not going down with the ship here, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to give this stuff up. You've got guys like Bill Taylor, who is like clearly like.
So just want to be clear, you want me to do a crime.
Right.
You would like me to do treason.
Exactly. But I ask because I think there are broad swaths of politically engaged people who don't care about this.
Yeah.
And as opposed to like broad swaths of people who are not politically engaged who don't care, which is, that's par for the course on some level.
Yeah, right.
But
I mean, a lot of it is, I think, the hangover from the entire Mueller saga, where for years you heard about, this is Trump is uniquely dangerous, and he's corrupt, and he colluded with a foreign power and it's treason and all that stuff. And just wait for the Mueller report to come out, and it's a drip, 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 and they're going to take him down, and vote. Really, you have to make sure we elect Democrats to Congress in 2018, and they're going to hold him accountable. They're going to impeach him, and then Pelosi takes the gavel and they don't impeach him, and she says, I'm not going to impeach him. And then the Mueller report comes out, which really lays it out that the firing James Comey was obstruction of justice. It absolutely was. I don't think anyone disagrees on that point. Anyone actually serious and honest about it, because he fucking said so himself. And after that, it was like, okay, whatever, that story's done. Let's move on to a new thing. So there's a little bit of boy who cried wolf there, isn't there?
Yes, I think so. But now we do actually have impeachment hearings.
Those transcripts that just broke last night, that's pretty damning right there.
That's about it.
What is interesting is, Watergate is the obvious comparison, right? And with Watergate, it was the cover-up. It wasn't the crime that really did Nixon in, because the actual root crime of Watergate, like the facts that they established, probably on their own, if they had come out as it was happening, would not have been impeachable. It would have looked bad.
Right.
It would have been bad. But Nixon probably could have gotten away with another Checkers speech if he said, some people under me, they did this.
Explain the Checkers speech to the people, Virgil.
So in the 1950s, Nixon was the vice president. In 1956, Eisenhower was running for re-election, and there was this pressure to dump Nixon from the ticket because Nixon had accepted basically bribes from a lobbyist.
Say what? Slush fund.
It was like a slush fund of California, oligarchs, basically, right?
And that included, famously, a dog given to Nixon's daughter named Checkers. And Nixon went on television. He gave this speech saying, no, it wasn't a slush fund, blah, blah, blah. That was just a gift. And you know what? If you want me to send the money back, I'll send the money back. But I'm not sending back the dog because my little girl loves the dog. And that was the end of that.
Right. And I mean, I think that, getting people to break into an office could be a bit of a problem. But you could distance yourself if you came out really quickly. You fired the right people. You said, take this hit. The
cover up, the competence, and the fact that it is being directed by Nixon, and that all of this it came out at some point, which showed the depths of his Machiavellianism and his paranoia. That's what did him in ultimately. With Trump, it's weird because everything happens immediately because these aren't complex schemes of his. These are things that he just says because he has an unregulated id.
I mean, I think there's a very important point because it's almost the opposite. Like Trump almost learned that it was the cover up that does you in. And so he goes on national television and announces that we did this. Mm-hmm. And what I think Trump understands is that in America now, it is the cover up, not the crime. And so if I come out and announce I did the crime, I'm okay.
Yeah, it puts everyone in a weird position. Like, wait, he just admitted to doing the crime. What do we do now?
Let's play this clip
Lena
of this.
Dunham defense.
Do we go get it?
Say about me that I haven't already said about myself.
No. What do you do? Do we go put handcuffs on him? He just said he did the crime. Everyone is confused now.
Right, exactly.
You're supposed to cover this stuff up, but the reason why he can't though is because he has absolutely no competent people around him who could possibly even not even cover up the crime, but even do the crime in a competent fashion.
He won't allow them to cover it up because he's just convinced that I can go out there and I can say, I mean, on some level, this is sort of like, you mentioned the spectacle. Some way, this is a little bit of the Sex Pistols where you build in the critique into the product on some level.
It's hyper real.
And here,
that's what persuaded you on those. The built-in critique.
Well, here's Lee Zeldin, right? He comes out. This is Representative Lee Zeldin from Long Island or wherever in New York, and he comes out in the middle of the inquiry. I guess it's about 4 o'clock. He comes out of the Volcker hearing. I think it is, and says like, the whole story got completely destroyed. Now, of course, he's lying, but he's like, the whole story got completely destroyed today. The idea that Trump was looking for something from the Ukrainians about investigation, and watch what happens to him here. He's in the mode that you were talking about, like, oh, we got to cover this up.
Yeah.
And he doesn't realize that the guy he's covering up for is not in that mode.
Yeah.
These committees of jurisdiction are blowing massive holes inside of the theory, the narrative that Chairman Schiff has been providing to the public. For example, when he says that President Trump was asking President Zelensky to manufacture dirt on the Bidens, today blows a hole in that argument. When you're making the claim that the president was asking for a quid pro quo with President Zelensky, today is blowing a massive hole in the middle of that allegation.
The president asked the president of Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden today.
I'm sorry, one more time.
The president asked the president of Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden today on camera. He also asked China to investigate Joe Biden today on camera. How is that blowing a hole in that argument?
So with regards to, I don't want to get into all the answers to all of the questions you're asked with regards to the quid pro quo allegations that have been leveled. There is a lot of evidence of the fact that people knew on both sides, very clearly, on both the United States side and the Ukraine side, that there was no connection. There was no linkage between the two. And as a matter of fact, Ukraine didn't even know that the money was even being held up at the time. It was crystal clear, the guidance that was being provided on both sides, U.S. and Ukraine, the readouts from the July 25th call on both sides. But again, I hesitate to get into all the substance, the ins and outs, answering every detail of that before the interview finishes this evening.
The powerful advantage that Trump and Giuliani have is they absolutely have no discomfort in lying. I mean, this is like what happens when a relatively normal scumbag is just like,
well, he just realized, like, wait a second. Oh my God, the earth just moved underneath my feet. I've got to get out of here as soon as possible.
They're going to have to run a cover-up where Trump contradicts their general talking. Like every day they go like, all right, we're on the same page. There's no quid pro quo. The president didn't say this. 30 minutes later, exactly. And I'd ask other people to do this too.
Well, Volker was in there for 9 hours. So Zeleny comes out and he's going back in to finish the interview, and that's where I think the texts show up. And so he was lucky; he dodged the bullet.
The defense has to be that there wasn't a quid pro quo. That yes, he asked them to investigate Joe Biden, but that's a normal, that's a normal thing for the president to do, to investigate corruption, ensure that our trade partners investigate corruption. Obviously, politically motivated. Would you say that let's put aside the notion that Trump held hostage like aid or an arms sale in exchange for an investigation of Joe Biden? If all he said was China and Ukraine should investigate Joe Biden, would that itself be impeachable?
I think so. I mean, I think that the idea that the president is doing that and particularly as a candidate against the political rival, I think that's highly problematic. There are it is not the president's job. There's no indication that the Justice Department has been working on this investigation on their own, and we're getting stonewalled and we need help. That's not the way this flowed.
Was it true?
It flowed the opposite way. And that's what I think is problematic.
In the early 90s, did George H.W. Bush's campaign ask the major government to release stuff about Bill Clinton dodging the draft, or did they do that on their own to curry favor with a sister party?
I don't know.
In itself,
that's kind of analogous.
It could be.
In itself, does that constitute collusion? Collusion's a word that's the meaning of it has been obliterated over the past few years.
Well, yeah. I mean, collusion as defined in the Mueller report was specifically not, I do something that I like, that I know that you like, and you do something that I like. And we keep doing this back and forth. And even though we're getting cues from each other, if we don't articulate it, it's not collusion. Mm-hmm. In this instance, I'm sorry. This is like we have one of the players saying, as I said on the phone last night, I don't think we should be holding up aid for political domestic reasons.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the guy at the heart of it thought that's what they were doing. And so it's, I mean, I think like,
it's really what it seems like. But so that can't be the case. Like for Trump's defense, that has to not be the case. Because I think I think your line on that being collusion is ambiguous enough to most people to let Republicans off the hook. At least to not move the needle is what I'm saying overall in what people believe and how they view the president. But I think that's the line to be crossed right there into an explicit, you do this for me.
I don't think that the political salience of impeachment is what you're talking about. I think the value of impeachment, I mean, aside from like, for all the people who think that what Trump is doing is corrupt, I think it's important to say our system is working at least enough to hold this guy accountable, right? Like as skeptical as we all are of the media as an institution and of a whole range of things. You're going to be concerned about this whistleblower, but you don't care about Edward Snowden.
Yeah.
Like all of this definitely problematic and room for cynicism. But at the very least, to ignore this would be that much more deeply problematic. But in terms of its political efficacy, I think the real value is you don't even have to necessarily sell people on the idea that he should be impeached, because I think he's going to be impeached. I think that's already. I think that's basically a fait accompli. The value is in that race in Iowa, in that race, that congressional race in Arizona, in that congressional race in Colorado, in that senatorial race in Maine, you're going to be able to, if you're a Democrat running against a Republican, you're going to be able to say, you voted to protect Donald Trump. End of story. You're on Trump's team. And now if somebody votes for you, they're voting for Trump.
I agree with that. I'm wondering, but how far does that go? Because doesn't that at some point doesn't that meet a hardcore of Trump support?
Of
that's
course.
not going to be moved.
So
I'm saying we can say, this will move the needle in Maine, but will it move the needle in or make a state like Kansas competitive?
No.
Will it make a state like Kentucky competitive?
No. It could in Texas.
Because I mean I really think like after that transcript was released last night, it hinges on two questions. I think the importance of this, just get beyond the whole thing of, defending the Constitution and our institutions or whatever. There are two critical questions. One, could there be an actual breaking point where enough Republicans in the Senate would remove him?
No. I do. No, there is a breaking point.
But two, and it's tied to the first question. Trump has, his approval ratings have been in a very narrow band his entire presidency. Could this actually break his approval ratings? Could he actually drop beneath where, he has had a hard floor of like 35%?
I think that it's conceivable he could drop a point or two but I think this was the same thing during the Bush years. There's 35% of the population that's it. They're not moving. They're intractable. And the only line where you'll have any Republican senators vote for impeachment is the day that Trump is caught on video, naked, running around the front of the White House, chasing that little boy who was, in the meme, mowing the lawn. That's it.
I think that's still wrong.
And
it's exactly. I was exposing corruption.
But I think that all the data from 2018 shows that it's not a question of persuading Trump voters. It is a question of getting people who are on the sidelines out to vote against Trump. And this makes it that much easier to get people who aren't necessarily compelled to vote against a congressperson to vote against Trump by voting against that congressperson, or to vote against Trump about voting against that Republican senator, because there is no greater way to tie yourself to a president than voting to not impeach them. Mm-hmm. I think. I mean, look, this is what.
But is this? But the story has to matter for that to matter, or else it gets dismissed as partisan politics. But was that the case in 2018. Are you saying that this is substantively worse than what had come out by Election Day 2018, where the Democrats did take back the House, but they lost ground in the Senate? They lost swing states. They lost the Florida Senate race, for instance.
Well, I do think that it is. I think it makes a difference, but I think it's basically just the way the Democrats are reacting. I mean, buy into this concept of basically the reaction shot. I do, as a director, I'm shooting an action that someone does, and the audience, I tell the audience how to react to it.
With laugh tracks.
By laugh track or by showing a reaction shot from someone that that the audience relates to.
Like a horn honking noise,
exactly.
You throw a
Foley
pie.
Work.
That's basic comedy. I understand. You
Foley
don't
work, but it's the reaction that tells the audience how they should interpret this. And when the Democrats come up and actually impeach, I think it basically says to people who don't pay that much of attention, like, this is worthy of impeachment. Mm-hmm. And it's not, the underlying thing is he leveraged aid to a foreign country to get dirt on a political rival. And, it's not like these cast of characters either, are like distinct. It's not like they're going to bring Giuliani up there and people are going to be like, that's like Ollie North.
Well, there's also, Matt pointed this out the other day, it's the thing itself, the underlying thing is actually something that would really piss Republicans off, who are content to see Trump. He can do whatever he wants. He can put children in camps. He can, be a buffoon on the world stage. That doesn't matter unless he doesn't screw with interest rates. He doesn't mess with the Fed, and he doesn't mess with arms sales to Ukraine or Saudi Arabia or Israel. Once he starts screwing with stuff like that, it's okay. No, the adults have to step in.
The real question is, if this is what he did with Ukraine, what else has he done with there's other readouts from other phone calls in this most protected, secure server in the
Has he
the
not
US
figured out that everything he says on the phone is like that going to be released?
I think
at some point?
that's why he still gives out his private number. Like, everybody reported it as like him being an idiot, which he is, but that's probably also his, like,
I just give out my
hit me
burner
in my
phone.
direct line.
Call me in my
Hit me on
burner.
my direct
Call
line.
my burner. But I also think that, like, I'll tell you what would really do him in is if with those people is if he finds out that this war with China, this trade war with China, was because they wouldn't give information on Hunter Biden.
That's the other thing
and I'm not 100% sure because it was reported today that he had a conversation with Xi about Biden.
I will say so. I think we largely agree on this, and I'm not trying to be relativistic, but the fact that at the core of this is Joe Biden's scummy son with a job that he obviously didn't earn, that's, that holds the story back a little bit. And I worry that your average person who's not really, man on the street is not really paying attention that closely could be persuaded by an argument that, well, wait, he was making how much working for a gas firm? Mm-hmm. While his dad was vice president, that does seem like something to be investigated.
I mean, I think there's some truth to that. And I think if
I'm not saying they're comparable at all.
No, they're not comparable. They aren't comparable at all. But it is
ridiculous when I hear Democrats pushing the impeachment hard, or people in the media say, and by the way, at the root of the story is 100% false. There's nothing there about Joe Biden.
There's a conspiracy, but this is the same thing that happened with Hillary Clinton. This precisely, there is a conspiracy which is false, which is this prosecutor getting fired. That is false and actually contradicts all of the evidence, and that's a whole other conversation about how we use corruption and so on, which I think is important in a car wash world to talk about. But regardless, the one thing that is true and probably even legal is that this kid got an astronomical payday to sit on an energy board. Everybody thinks that's disgusting, and this is exactly what Trump can do. He mashes up truth and fiction in a way that's effective.
Well, I think without a doubt, if Joe Biden cared about beating Donald Trump, he would step out of the race right now.
Son.
He would realize.
No, sorry,
he would realize that, like, that this is too much of a liability to enter into the general election. But I don't know that.
And there's a lot more with Hunter. I mean, look, there's Biden's whole career, but then even if you want to just do the threat of his son, I believe he started lobbying for MBNA right around the time that Biden was pushing through the bankruptcy bill. I think he even was on the Amtrak board.
Yeah.
But Biden would never think that because for guys at that level, that's just business as usual.
Well, of
that's
course.
normal.
That's
for the same reason that Hillary Clinton didn't decide not to run after giving those Wall Street speeches
Right.
or after using the
this is
Clinton
par
fund
for the
as a
course.
global slush fund.
Well, Trump has actually been quite adept at taking what we consider to be run-of-the-mill corruption that is almost like just the way things are done and making it as if he is indignant about it. Like, I mean, that's what he used to say. Like, I know these politicians are corrupt because I was the one corrupting them.
Yeah.
And he runs on liberal hypocrisy, right? Yeah. And it doesn't matter to the people who like him that Trump is a total hypocrite too, for whatever reason, because he doesn't have the affect, like he's all high and mighty, while they do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we've talked about the impeachment.
Liberal hypocrisy.
Let's talk about the election.